April 9th, 1865. Appomattox Courthouse. Two men meet to end America's bloodiest war. Robert E. Lee in a pristine uniform, Ulysses S. Grant in a mud-stained private's jacket. But these weren't just two generals. They were two completely different bloodlines, a genetic divide that reveals the Civil War wasn't just North versus South. It was aristocracy versus common man. Welcome to Famous Roots. Today, we're conducting DNA audits on Civil War generals whose blood tells a story more shocking than any history book. And the final case? A general whose genetic secret was hidden for over a century. If you're passionate about the hidden genealogies behind American history, subscribe to Famous Roots right now. Hit that bell. You won't want to miss what we uncover next. Robert E. Lee, the gentleman general who turned down command of the Union Army to defend Virginia. History remembers him as noble and tragic, but our DNA audit reveals he didn't just represent the Old South. He was the Old South, written into every chromosome. Lee's genealogical mapping traces back through Virginia's elite, the Carters, the Fitzhughs, the Randolphs. His mother descended from Robert King Carter, who owned over 300,000 acres and over 1,000 enslaved people at his death in 1732. His genetic line connects directly to English nobility, minor aristocracy from Shropshire, with documented lineage to the Norman conquest. But here's the irony. Lee's DNA also reveals Scots-Irish ancestry on his paternal grandmother's line, the same working-class immigrant stock that made up most Confederate soldiers. The men who died for him came from blood he carried, but had forgotten. Robert E. Lee wasn't just defending the South. He was defending a social order where his literal bloodline entitled him to power. Now, meet his opposite, Ulysses S. Grant. The man who beat Lee wasn't supposed to be a general at all. Grant's DNA audit reveals working-class Scots-Irish Presbyterian roots from Pennsylvania and Ohio. His paternal line traces to Matthew Grant, who arrived in Massachusetts in 1630, not as gentry, but as a common settler. Grant's father, Jesse, was a tanner, a tradesman. The smell of animal hides clung to young Ulysses throughout his childhood. He hated it. He hated everything about the working-class grind. But here's what makes Grant's genetics fascinating. 0 aristocratic markers. No plantation owners. No landed gentry. Just generations of farmers, craftsmen, and small business owners grinding out survival on the frontier. When Grant met Lee at Appomattox, it wasn't just two generals. It was two Americas, one born to rule, one born to work, and the working man won. Grant's DNA tells us the Civil War wasn't just about slavery or states' rights. It was about whose blood would define America's future. Thomas Jonathan Stonewall Jackson, Lee's most brilliant commander, a tactical genius, a religious zealot who believed God ordained Confederate victory. But Jackson's DNA reveals something his fellow Confederate officers tried to ignore. He was poor, dirt poor. Jackson's genealogical mapping shows pure Scots-Irish Appalachian stock, Presbyterian immigrants who settled in the mountains of Western Virginia. His father died of typhoid when Jackson was 2. His mother died when he was 7. He was raised by an uncle in a hardscrabble existence that Confederate aristocrats found embarrassing. His genetic line contains 0 markers of wealth or status. No plantation owners. No English gentry. Just generation after generation of subsistence farmers clinging to mountain soil. And yet, this orphan from the hollows became the Confederacy's greatest general, proving that in war, blood doesn't guarantee victory. Brilliance does. When Jackson died from friendly fire at Chancellorsville in 1863, Lee lost more than a general. He lost proof that the common Southern man could lead, and that aristocratic blood wasn't destiny. William Tecumseh Sherman, the man who burned Atlanta, the general who made Georgia howl, the architect of total war. Sherman's DNA audit reveals something unexpected. He came from respectable New England stock, but his childhood was marked by poverty and displacement. His father, Charles Sherman, was an Ohio Supreme Court justice, but he died suddenly in 1829, leaving 11 children destitute. 9-year-old William was taken in by Thomas Ewing, a wealthy neighbor who raised him but never formally adopted him. Sherman's genetic line traces to English Puritans who arrived in Massachusetts in the 1630s, solid middle-class merchants and farmers. No aristocracy, no inherited wealth, just Protestant work ethic and survival instinct. But here's what makes Sherman's genetics revealing. His middle name, Tecumseh, was given by his father in honor of the Shawnee chief. Some family genealogists have long whispered about possible Native American ancestry on his maternal grandmother's line, though definitive DNA proof remains elusive. What we know for certain is that Sherman's bloodline carried no entitlement. When he marched through Georgia destroying plantation aristocracy, he wasn't just following orders. He was leveling a class system his own genetics never belonged to. And now, the case that changes everything. George Henry Thomas, the Rock of Chickamauga, the Virginian who stayed loyal to the Union, and whose family disowned him for it. Thomas was born in Southampton County, Virginia, in 1816, plantation country. His genealogical mapping shows the same elite Virginia stock as Robert E. Lee, English gentry, colonial landowners, slaveholders. But in 1831, something happened that changed Thomas forever. Nat Turner's rebellion erupted in Southampton County. Enslaved people rose up and killed over 50 white residents. 15-year-old George Thomas survived by hiding. When the Civil War began, Thomas faced a choice: defend Virginia like Lee or defend the Union. He chose the Union. His family never spoke to him again. His sisters turned his picture to the wall. Here's what the DNA audit reveals. George Thomas and Robert E. Lee shared nearly identical genetic heritage. Virginia aristocracy, English nobility, plantation wealth. They could have been cousins. Their bloodlines were indistinguishable. But Thomas proves that DNA isn't destiny. Two men, same blood, opposite choices. Lee defended the aristocracy written in his genes. Thomas defended a principle that transcended his bloodline, that the Union mattered more than heritage. When Thomas died in 1870, his family still refused to claim his body. His own blood rejected him because he rejected what that blood represented. The Civil War wasn't just fought on battlefields. It was fought in bloodlines. Aristocracy versus common man. English gentry versus Scots-Irish grit. Heritage versus principle. Robert E. Lee's DNA carried centuries of entitlement. Ulysses S. Grant's carried generations of struggle. Stonewall Jackson proved poor blood could command armies. William Sherman proved middle-class blood could burn empires. And George Thomas proved that blood doesn't determine loyalty, conscience does. DNA tells us who we were. But history shows us who we chose to become. If these revelations fascinated you, subscribe to Famous Roots for more DNA audits on American legends. We're uncovering genetic secrets that rewrite history, one bloodline at a time. Thanks for watching. And remember, heritage is written in your genes, but your choices write history.